Well, I appreciate everybody here. I know, coming after a break, a lot of you would probably rather be at the pool or ocean, so it really means a lot. My name is Tim Picciott. I'm a certified financial planner, which is not usually something you'd expect to hear at Cryptopulco. First off, I want to wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day, and in case anybody, has a Valentine that they aren't sure whether on the fence or not, we got our friend Jeffrey Epstein over here. I actually had my first Epstein meme on Facebook that I personally made in 2016, so I am an OG in that space. But as a financial advisor, I did get fired for speaking here 2 years ago, so I don't want to get fired again. So I'll just give a quick disclosures. Basically, if I'm not your advisor, I'm not giving you individual advice. Not an attorney or tax professional. This is a high-level overview that will not make you an expert. Consult with your own financial professional. And if you don't know one, I do know a guy. Oh, wrong way. And so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about what makes me excited enough that I actually quit my job to speak here two Cryptopulcos ago. A little bit about my journey, because you can't just trust any guy you see up here, especially a financial advisor. I mean, I personally can't stand 99% of financial advisors, so I understand if there's any hesitation out there. But believe me, at the end of this presentation, there's going to be just mind-blowing tax tips that no one else knows. I mean, even other CFPs, it's above their pay grade. And I've custom tailored this for the Cryptopulco audience. And then if we have some extra time, which I guess we do because no one's speaking after me, we've got bonus information. So I think it's important to start with where I came from in the financial industry. And can you guys hear me okay? I know, okay. At the TDV, there was did anybody see me speak at the TDV Summit? Yeah. Okay, it's about half the audience. So I apologize to that half. They'll kind of hear the story again. So I started my career September 15th, 2008. If you want to search engine that, that's the day Lehman Brothers collapsed. Welcome to the business. And so I was a financial planner because I was trying to find a job as a stockbroker, except in 2008, I might as well have been trying to find a job as like a Hawaiian Tropics model, because that was not something that was going to happen. So right off the bat, I was in classes where my class won the national competition on the Federal Reserve against Harvard, Yale, MIT. Our actual saying in the class was, "In Fed we trust." I was brainwashed that the Federal Reserve is, this awesome institution, and I was completely brainwashed by all this. And then one day I didn't have a chance encounter with Rob Zombie, but I had a chance encounter with a guy that looked like Rob Zombie, and he starts telling me that the Federal Reserve is private. This is shortly after 2008, and meanwhile I was told in 2007, taking all these classes, that, oh, we can never have another financial crisis again because the Fed's done all this stuff to mitigate current, ongoing concerns. Meanwhile, we were technically in a recession when I was being told this. So I was already not a very trusting person to begin with. And so this guy tells me this. I'm like, come on. I was in the class that won the national competition. Actually, the endowment fund I ran, I put it all in cash before I left for the summer. So it actually was the top performing endowment fund in America in 2008. And so I'm like, come on, I've got a Series 7, studying for my CFP, had a CRPC, Series 66, a whole bunch of other stuff I'm probably leaving off. And I'm like, you are some painter that looks like Rob Zombie. There's no way you're right. I'm going to go prove you wrong in 5 seconds. I mean, you do know there's something called Google. So then he goes, okay, we'll watch this movie, Freedom to Fascism. And so I'm like, okay, I'll watch the movie Freedom to Fascism. And then that blew my mind. And then my wife, then girlfriend at the time, because whatever I do, I get obsessed with. So, I can't just go and run a 5K, I've got to go do an Ironman. I can't just go spend a weekend to become a financial planner. I have to become a CFP. Everything I do is to the max. And so my wife just saw me researching. And so she's like, all right, I want to shut you up. So without me even knowing this book existed, she got me Creature from Jekyll Island. And so that was the thing that I started with during this whole journey. And then that led me to the End the Fed movement. I was running a marathon in 2012, carrying a Ron Paul banner, just to kind of, woo! And actually, the guy who invited me here was the guy, so when I first spoke here in, February 2018, the guy who basically vouched for me is the guy who came up with that logo and was like, hey, Jeff, you got to have Tim come over here. And really the whole genesis of this story is that I was at my buddy's house, Ernie, who I was telling you guys about. He's like, hey, we got a bunch of crypto rich people here. And this is back in August of 2017, so back when Bitcoin was around, like $3,000. It had just, come up from about $1,000. And so he's like, hey, how do we help people? Ideally, there were some people that are a little bit older. Some of them didn't have heirs. Some of them, they bought their Bitcoin on Coinbase or Kraken, or they're on the grid. And so if you're already on the grid, how are you going to take your funds and get them into the economy without getting killed by taxes? And so I knew exactly what to do. The problem is I didn't know how to implement it. Literally 3 days later, this guy who I knew from a networking group goes, hey, I want to introduce you to my father. I'm like, who's your father? He goes, well, he pretty much kind of invented the charitable giving space. I'm like, wow, that's like the exact person I needed to talk to. And so, a month later, I go to a crypto conference, and a lot of the speakers who were here were there, and people started asking me about IRAs. Next thing I know, I'm like, well, I actually have no idea how to put crypto into an IRA. The next month I go to a conference that has nothing to do with Bitcoin at all. It was a financial media conference, super statist. I'm telling everybody what I'm trying to do. They're all laughing at me in October of 2017. And next thing I know, there's a guy there who specialized in self-directed IRAs for an RIA, which I didn't even know was a thing. So somehow, like, all these people that I needed in my life, like, I just manifested all of them coming perfectly into my life. Except that manifestation resulted in when I was going to speak at Cryptopulco, as the price of Bitcoin was skyrocketing, it was all of a sudden everybody's radar. I spent like 1,000 hours trying to figure out, all the trust stuff, trying to figure out all the self-directed IRA stuff, just diving deep into this, and all of a sudden I was told at LPL Financial, largest broker-dealer in America, they said, every advisor in America, 17,000 of you, all of you are banned from talking about Bitcoin, thinking about Bitcoin, daydreaming about Bitcoin. And so I'm like, wow, that's going to put a pretty big wrinkle in my plans of everything I was trying to do. And so the registered investment advisory firm I was with, they were like, okay, you can drop your Series 7 and you can be a fee-only advisor and just use LPL as a custodian. You can drop all brokerage affiliation. That's probably confusing. Most financial advisors don't even understand it either, so don't worry. So that would have been a big move. Now they got their panties in the bunch. It was like February 10th and said, hey, guess what? You can't actually speak at Cryptopulco. And so I decided, you know what? If it's in my client's best interest to do something, I'm not 5 years old. I'm not going to be told what I can and can't do. I just moved from another firm 2 years ago, 2 years prior, and was rocking and rolling, making over 6 figures residual income. I didn't really, have to really do too much if I didn't want to. And I decided, you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to go, I'm going to speak at Cryptopulco. So in order to speak here a couple years ago, I had to pay a $17,000 fine to break a contract, drop my Series 7, sell all of my brokerage business, and then the state of Arizona then decided to hold on to my paperwork for about 7 months, wouldn't allow me to actually work, and then tried to essentially bankrupt me. I ended up selling my house to basically fund it. Luckily, I bought the house at the exact bottom in Arizona. And my wife gave me 2 years to rent, so my 2 years is up now, so now I probably have to buy in at the exact top. So, good for me, but happy wife, happy life. Love you, so thank you for sticking with me. And now I'm actually bigger than I was before 2 years ago, so the state can suck it. So when it comes to a financial advisor, I don't know. Oh. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So I just wanted to tell that story because as a financial advisor, obviously everyone should be leery. Because I'm a financial advisor. However, if someone has a story that can beat that, I want to shake their hand because it probably doesn't exist. So what really got me into all this is when I realized that our system is backed by debt. And so to get $1 into the system, you have to have $1 of debt. And so the very first dollar that was created, December 23rd, 1913, had 4% interest on it. And so the very first dollar that you lend out, automatically you have to pay back that $1 with $1. And so how do you ever pay back $1 if only $1 was lent into existence? And so it was this magical epiphany that I had. I'm like, wait a minute, we are basically living in high-tech slavery right now that's over everybody's heads. And then it really pissed me off because I was like, if I had all those credentials I listed before and I was on the class that won the national competition on this and I didn't even know it, who the hell else knows it? And so I am very pleased to say now that, because of people like Gio Griffin and this conference and Jeff and a lot of people who are here, that a lot of people do know this information now. So I actually am pretty optimistic at where things are going. I'm going to have, actually it's the text is actually crypto. This was the old presentation I did. So if you guys want to get my TDV speech that I gave a couple days ago, I'll actually send that out. So the number is the 71441, but it's the line is crypto. Now, some of the reasons why I get excited about this is, traditionally in the IPO market, as initial public offerings, what companies would do is they would go out to Goldman Sachs. And now Goldman Sachs is like, oh, if you don't have enough diversity on your board, that actually, we're not going to IPO for you. But through blockchain, eventually what's going to happen, it's already starting to happen, is security tokens where you can bypass Wall Street altogether. So I'm very, very excited for this. The stock market, what's going to happen is, traditionally now, if you buy the S&P 500, which I'm not sure a lot of you do because you're at Cryptopulco, what's going to happen in the future is you're going to just buy all 500 stocks at once because it's going to trade immediately. It's going to cost next to nothing. Already, most brokerages have already lowered their fees down to zero, like TD Ameritrade, Schwab, I think Fidelity, Vanguard have already lowered it to zero already. And it's because of blockchain and because of people like Patrick Byrne of Overstock and T0 that have implemented these solutions. Now, I didn't have that one memorized. Thank you, though. Now, there's things like data storage. I mean, there's cryptocurrencies like storage where we can, basically, take over things like Google Drive and all other decentralized applications. Because let's say instead of having your smartphone and going to the Apple Store, you could have it decentralized where it goes to, whoever. I mean, it could be on Ethereum if they ever solve their scaling issues, and we can create an environment where we don't need these people. And if some of you are new to the blockchain space, what I wish I knew, because I knew about Bitcoin at $1, I was on all the Daily Paul forums, and I was like, okay, it's pretty cool that we have this transfer mechanism that can't be really stopped. That's all I really knew about it. But I didn't realize that there's other things you can do about it. I didn't realize that you can put the stock market on a blockchain. I didn't realize you can do land titling on a blockchain. I didn't realize that there's other things, decentralized applications. No one ever told me that, and I wish in late 2010 when I found out about it that somebody hit me in the head and told me that, because I probably wouldn't be here. I'd probably be off implementing all these solutions on myself, and I wouldn't have to do any of this. So anyways, making money is nice, and keeping more of your money is even better. And actually, when I tried to saying like I'm rich, bitch, and actually one of the first images that came up was actually this. I didn't actually create that, so I'm like, all right, well, it's very fitting for the crowd. But we are playing a very high stakes game where it's not about getting the entire world to adopt Bitcoin, not getting the entire world to adopt crypto. Because one thing that I realized early on is that this could be the mark of the beast type system if used in the wrong hands. And so my fear is that we get all these dipshits in here, people that like Ripple. And, I apologize if you guys like Ripple, but not really. But I actually did fire a client that wanted to sell her house and put all of her money into Ripple because I'm like, I'm not going to be a part of that decision. So what I'm fearing is that there's going to be some sort of Goldman Sachs.gov coin that's going to be tied in with social credit score, and now they're going to turn you off. And so that's why things like Monero and other private currencies, that's the way to go. So we need to educate people on doing things the right way, because this is where the future is going. All money is going to be digital. It already is almost all digital. And so this is the battle for our future right here, and I don't know if there's another topic that's actually more important. But now, that's enough with all the BS. For those of you who do plan on making a lot of money in Bitcoin or already did, and some of this applies to non-Bitcoin and crypto as well, we're going to go over some very important information right now that I don't know very many people in the world understand. And this is one of my favorite quotes. For my tax evasion, I should be punished. For my tax avoidance, I don't really know about that, but anyways, I can't really say that as an advisor. But for my tax avoidance, I should be commended, and that's from a judge for whatever that's worth. And then another quote I like about this is, there are two systems of theft in our country, one for the informed and one for the uninformed. And again, that's from another judge. Now, with all of these, the most important thing you have to know is you have to plan in advance. There's very few things that you can do after the fact. Now, there is a couple things you can do after the fact, but even those would have been better off if you had planned in advance. Now, one of the things that you can do after the fact, and this is one of the few things you can do, is something called an economic opportunity zone. Now, personally, if it's meant to encourage growth, like why don't we just make the entire fucking country an economic opportunity zone? I don't know, I'm just a little crazy guy over here thinking this, but it's because they want to socially engineer everybody. We all know that. That's why they're doing it. Now, in QOF, that stands for Qualified Opportunity Fund. If you hold on to this investment, for more than 5 years, there's a 10%, and don't worry, the next slide I break it down in an example. So, and I will send this out to you if you guys want to text in your phones, crypto to 71441. Now, if you hold on to this for more than 5 years, you get a 10% exclusion of the gain. Hold on to more than 7 years, you get a 15% exclusion of the gain. But the more important thing is, let's say you sold $1 million of Bitcoin, and now you invested it into some other fund or something, and now it's at $10 million. The gain from $1 million to $10 million is all, your basis gets stepped up to $10 million. So that actually is a pretty cool thing. So hypothetically, investor sells $1 million worth of Bitcoin. Let's say they bought it at a penny, or they mined it into one of these funds, and let's say that grows. Let's say after you sold it, you're very wise with your investments. Maybe you start a company, maybe you invest into a fund. It kind of depends what your expertise is. And then after 10 years, your business grows to 5 million. Your new basis is now 5 million. So that 1 million to 5 million was all tax-free. And then after 10 years, instead of having to pay tax on $1 million, you're paying tax on $850,000. And now I've got other strategies later on in the presentation that shows how you can lower that even further, because a lot of these strategies can be used in conjunction with one another. Now, moving to Puerto Rico is great. I failed to convince my wife to move to Puerto Rico, that I've been working on her for a while, but we're building a house right now, so I have not been able to convince her, because there are great benefits to moving to Puerto Rico, especially in this space. But what a lot of people think is, oh, I can just go take my $10 million of Bitcoin and move to Puerto Rico and avoid all taxes legally. It doesn't really work that way. And so one of the big misconceptions about moving to Puerto Rico is that, let's say, again, so here's the example. I used $10 million. And so a lot of people think, okay, I'm just going to move there and avoid all taxes. It's only it's sort of like the economic opportunity zone, where it's only for the gains that you got while you're in Puerto Rico. So you have a business, it's worth $1 million, you move it to Puerto Rico, now your business is worth $20 million. The gain from 1 million to 20 million, that's in the preferred tax rate, but the first million is not. And so that's one of the big misconceptions that I see out there. I've done an interview with several people who are experts on this subject. This is not meant to make you an expert, but I just want to let you know that this stuff does exist out there. Now there's a bonus tip that the 5 flag approach works in a similar fashion. So a lot of you probably know about prior taxpayer, perpetual traveler, my initials in reverse. But what happens with this is, if you are an American and you want to give up U.S. citizenship to become, let's say you got $10 million of Bitcoin, and what is going to happen is the government is going to pretend that you died. So you go and let's say you're worth $20 million, the government is going to pretend that you died that day, just like Jeffrey Epstein, who didn't kill himself. So there's gigantic tax ramifications with this, because when you die, they're going to impose the estate tax on you, all federal taxes, the estate tax in addition to the estate tax, all capital gains, all IRAs immediately become taxable. I mean, it is just, you just get walloped with taxes. And so if you do it before you get rich, yeah, and then you end up getting rich, and that's a great thing. But you can use other strategies that I'm going to present later on in conjunction with this to then lower your overall tax burden, potentially even down to 0. Now, another thing I want to mention is capital losses that are out there. So a lot of you, may have bought in at the peak, or got some, coins that we bought in towards the peak, or maybe we bought some coins that weren't so good, or we bought some Ripple that were out there. And for people that are in coins that are, it's actually on the congressional record. Shitcoin is now actually on the congressional record. Somebody did use that in the congressional parlance, so you can go look that up. You can use those losses to then offset future gains. And so I wouldn't sell something that's super low that you think can then bounce back up. But if something is basically dead, I mean, I guess you could sell it and then buy it right back because the IRS says that Bitcoin's property, not a security. So with securities, you can't do that, but they said it's a property. And so maybe they'll change that, but I didn't make the rules on that. So, I mean, let's say you bought a coin at $10, now it's 5 cents. I mean, you could sell it, book the loss, and then buy it back at 5 cents, or buy back I wouldn't buy back the same amount. I mean, I'd buy back not the same dollar amount, but buy back the same amount. Let's say you had 1,000 coins, buy back 1,000, now it costs you next to nothing. And then you get to use those losses to then offset gains in the future. So let's say, you had $500,000 worth of losses, you've got $500,000 worth of gains, and then later, like 2 years later, you can actually use that to cancel each other out, so that way you're not paying taxes. And so I think that also is going to be pretty valuable for a lot of people. Now, this doesn't apply to everybody, but there are some people out there, and what kind of gets me is there's even people out there who don't make a lot of money, and then they brag about how they're not paying taxes on their crypto. And a lot of them, and again, this is going to apply for a lot of people, but if you are married, you can make close to $80,000, and then actually the capital gains rate is actually 0. And so a lot of people don't realize. And so let's say you're already crypto rich and everything's already paid off, and you maybe only need to live off of $80,000 a year, and you're married. You could actually do so without paying any taxes legally right now. And so that's something a lot of people aren't aware of. Now again, the 8, 9, and 10 are the real money makers over here. So this was all kind of the warm-up act to get to that. Now the last warm-up act over here is annual gifting. And so as of last year, the IRS allows taxpayers to donate $15,000 per year. So if you're married, you and your wife can each do $15,000, so it makes it $30,000. And so according to the IRS, the general rule is that the basis in the property is the same as the basis of the donor. So if you were given stock that the donor had purchased for $10 a share, and that was his or her basis, and then they later sold it for 100, they would be the ones who paid tax on the 90, not you. And so that's one way to help get money out of your estate. And something that I think is really stupid, I mean, a lot of things I think are stupid with the tax code, like the entire thing, but the government is now saying even hard forks are a taxable event. And so, I mean, anyone can make a hard fork. I mean, I could go hard fork, right now, and then, okay, everyone, 3 people are using it, and now everyone has a taxable gain on there. I mean, that's just an example of people that know absolutely nothing, but, go figure. Now, with estate planning, this is kind of the real kit and caboodle here. And when we're taking a look at the rich, there was a study done where they took a look at the richest families in 1427, and they are still the richest families today. And why? It's because they are using these strategies. But this is more than just using these strategies to get rich, because what they're doing is they're creating foundations, they're creating trust, and then they're having their ideas are the ones that get to perpetuate throughout their lifetime. Not throughout their lifetime, throughout their entire legacy. So right now we're being, screwed by people like the, Carnegie Endowment, Ford Foundations, Rockefeller Foundations, and so they're having their ideology are being used to screw us, whereas we can put stuff into our own foundations to be able to use it against the man using their own tax code. And so there's a reason why this exists. It exists because this is what the people who are in Congress, this is what the things that they're doing, and they don't teach you this stuff. They don't teach you this stuff even if you're a CFP. It's things that you have to get very lucky and find the people that know what they're talking about. When it comes to charitable giving strategies, there's really 3 big main ones. Probably the second one there, the charitable remainder trust, is probably the biggest one. However, you can use all 3 of these in conjunction to create the perfect trifecta to legally avoid taxes if you are crypto rich, and this is really the part where you'd want to pay attention. So a donor advised fund, these are great for people that are already charitably inclined. So let's say you've got someone that donates $25,000 a year to charity already, and in one particular year, let's say you've got a gigantic tax burden, what you could do is you could just front load your giving in 1 year, where you could give $250,000 to your own donor advised fund, and then over the next 10 years, you could just then give that charity the $25,000 a year, or really at whatever rate you want to. But there's really ways where this strategy plays into the other 2, and I'll get to that in a minute, where it just absolutely creates an amazing situation when it comes to avoiding taxes. Now this one is the biggie that basically got me fired a couple years ago for presenting on this, which I don't know why. So the CRT, that's a charitable remainder trust. What happens is the person who has the appreciated crypto, they are donating it to their own charitable remainder trust. That then flows into them for the rest of their life. So let's say you donate $1 million. That $1 million goes to your own charitable foundation, which then gets paid out to you. And then you bypass all capital gains. So for every $1 million, that's $238,000 of savings. On top of that, you get a tax deduction. Now I'm going to get into a little bit detail on this on the next slides. Now as part of this level 500 financial planning, you use the tax deductions to then buy life insurance. But you don't just buy any life insurance, you put it into another special type of trust that we refer to as an ILIT, an irrevocable life insurance trust. And then now that flows outside, that doesn't then count for the estate tax, and now your heirs or your kids then get money tax-free completely when you pass away, and basically the only person that's worse off in this example is the IRS, and I do have an example where I go through this entire thing from beginning to end, so don't worry. I did mention for every $1 million, that's $238,000 saved in capital gains taxes. You then get a tax deduction that's based upon many factors such as your age, your spouse's age if it applies, withdrawal percentage, expected growth rate, and it's not a simple calculation. Like it's not like, oh hey, it's just you take 10% of this. It's an algorithm that they use. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an example where we have someone that's 55 years old. Again, for every million, it's $238,000 saved. This person at 55 years old, he would be getting, on top of the $238,000 saved, he would also be getting a $319,730 tax deduction on top of the $238,000 that he saved. And it's so funny when you see all of these elite people that are up there and saying, oh, I gave money to this, or I gave money to that, or I'm Bill Gates and I gave away all my money. Bullshit. They're doing things like this, and now they own the newspapers and they get to gallivant around like they're the most charitable people. And so it just drives me nuts when you actually know what you're talking about. But there's very few people that actually know this stuff. Now there's other things that apply to this, and there's, again, you're not going to be an expert after this, but you're going to know more than probably 99% of financial advisors after these next few slides. Now, in this example, Bob has $15 million in highly appreciated assets. It could be Bitcoin, it could be a business, it could be stock. I mean, it could be basically anything. It could be artwork, anything. Bob is 55 years old. We assume that he passes away at age 90, which in this case, which is 35 years later. We're assuming the assets grow 9% inside the trust versus 10% if he didn't have it. We're assuming he gets a level payment just for simplicity, but in real life you wouldn't get a level payment. You'd probably get a percentage, but that would just complicate all the provisos I'd have to make by a lot. So I decided to make it simpler. And Bob is married, but we're deciding to base it off his life, but you probably wouldn't do that in real life either. So what this is going to look like is right up front for donating that $15 million, he is going to get a $4.795, $950 upfront tax deduction on top of being able to bypass all the capital gains on those $15 million. So not only is he bypassing all capital gains at 23.8%, thanks to Obamacare, but he's also getting an extra almost $5 million tax deduction on top of that. And do we have a question? Yeah, so not only did he get out of paying all taxes on that, but he also got a tax deduction on top of that. And so the money that flows to them can then be offset by the tax deduction. It's a beautiful thing and how all this stuff really works. And so over the course of the lifetime, again, we assume that Bob's pulling out $750,000 per year. In real life, what you're doing is you're probably getting a percentage. And actually, the older you are, the higher the percentage actually gets. So I mean, I've seen people taking out 10 or 11% a year. It just sort of depends on a lot of different factors, like how charitably inclined you are, or basically, what your personal situation is. But, this is not cookie cutter advice. I mean, this is about as complicated as it's going to get. So, I will be around all week. I've got a Liberty Advisor booth out there that someone told me that blew over. So, but I was here getting this set up. So hopefully, maybe it's not there, but there'll probably be a tablecloth there at least. So what is going to happen in this? So Bob puts $15 million in. Over the course of his lifetime, he's getting close to $23 million. He's then using some of that upfront tax deduction so that also helps if you're healthy, to then buy life insurance. That life insurance is going into an irrevocable life insurance trust, which then goes to Bob's heirs tax-free. And then what is happening is it then goes to his own foundation afterwards. And because of the power of compounding, again, I only use 9%. I didn't use like a financial collapse crisis event and Bitcoin's going up 1,000,000%. I used 9%. So this is not a crazy number here. The other thing is trades made within inside of here can be tax-free. So let's say you put in $1,000 and now you're sitting on $15 million of Bitcoin. And my whole thing was, even though I'm a big fan of Bitcoin, I think it makes sense to, hey, let's take a little bit off the table. And when you're dealing with large numbers, you can't just hide $1 million from the IRS. And so people can say, oh, well, I'm not paying any taxes. You're making a few $1,000s. That's one thing. But if you are you bought it on Kraken or Coinbase or one of these major exchanges, you're already on the grid, and all of a sudden you've got $1 million house, and you're not claiming any income. I mean, that's how they got Al Capone. They didn't get Al Capone on any of the mafia stuff. They ended up getting him on tax evasion. And so this is a way where you can get the money in. It's legit, and it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And these can work. These strategies can all work in conjunction with one another. And so basically, if you don't do this, you're paying the government close to $75 million versus $4.5 million in total, because as you're taking money out, there is a lot of caveats to this. So there's the amount that you can deduct every year is going to be based off 30% of your AGI, and it does start to get complicated, but I don't want to bore people too much. But essentially, if it were me, I would even take a little bit less money if it means paying less money to the government. So here, you're paying the government $70 million less, and you're transferring a lot more to your heirs. They're getting it all tax-free. And this is, probably the biggest tax-saving tip there is in the world, at least for Americans. And now let's take a look at, what if crypto grew at 20%, which, is not a ridiculous number. Especially in a dollar collapse type scenario. So if your crypto portfolio grew at 20%, now you're taking a look at saving about $3.7 billion in taxes and transferring almost $828 million more. So, there's a lot of so for people that poo-poo this, okay, well, I'm going to be a lot richer than you, so okay, well, you can poo-poo it all you want, because I plan away on giving all of my money. because I'm not really going to give it away. I'm going to be doing this. And now, I think this is a great quote. No one wants to just give away, actually it should be gives away, so now it sounds sort of Asian, but no one wants to give away their money, but everyone would want to become a philanthropist if doing so didn't cost them very much. And so in most cases, it doesn't cost you anything. It actually costs you more to not do it than to actually do it. Now that's a charitable remainder trust. There's also something else called a charitable lead trust. A charitable lead trust works in the exact opposite direction. So let's say you've got an asset that you think is going to highly appreciate. It could be Bitcoin. It could be a business. It could be a lot of different things. You can put that business and you donate it to you could be your own donor advised fund. And so what happens is, so let's say you put actually it's probably better is we got this example over here. So let's say you've got $1 million of Bitcoin. What you can do is every year you donate that to charity, but it can be your own donor advised fund where that fund can either be something you do hands-on, or it could be like, hey, I've got these 10 charities I like giving money to, and I do this. I've seen some people where they have ridiculous stuff where they have their own like off-grid redoubts where they've got food for their family for basically perpetual generations, but they also use that to feed the homeless. So basically, it creates a situation where anyone in their progeny and family line would basically never have to worry about starving ever again. Now, after a set amount of time, that asset then flows back to you, but at a stepped-up basis. So let's say you bought Bitcoin at 30 cents, and now it's at, let's say now it's at 100,000, then it flows back to you, stepped up again at 100,000, and the other money was already back into your donor advised fund. And so there's all these different ways that you can actually use these strategies in conjunction with one another. Now, the amount that the step up of basis is going to be dependent on a lot of different things. So it's going to be dependent on how many years you're giving to the charity. So if you're giving to a charity for 2 years versus 20 years, if you're giving X, 5% versus 2%, I mean, there's all these different calculations that then determine how much of a step up in basis. And again, it's not just Bitcoin. It could be your business. It could be any artwork. I mean, there's I'm looking at Johnny Dollars, so yeah, there's a lot of different things it could be. Or you could diversify and maybe buy one of Johnny Dollars inside it, and it wouldn't. Test. Okay, I don't know why it keeps going out. Okay, so that's a charitable lead. That's a charitable lead trust, and I didn't do a slide on. And so you can use the charitable remainder trust with the charitable lead trust, with also the donor advised fund, with economic opportunity zones, and then just really dominate the entire system. Not everybody has to do that, but this is level. I mean, this information. I'm probably, when it comes to putting all this stuff together, I mean, I'm probably one of the most, especially when it comes to crypto, probably the most knowledgeable person in the world on that subject. Not to sound cocky, but I'd like to meet the guy who would know more than me on that subject. Just being honest. Now, this is bonus time stuff. So that was kind of like the main things I wanted to talk about. And I guess since no one else is talking after me, I don't have to talk like a machine gun super fast anymore. So imagine that you've got $1 million of Bitcoin or $100,000 of Bitcoin, and you pass away. I mean, who knows where your Bitcoin is? Who knows how to access it? Does your wife know how to access it? Do your kids know how to access it? Let's say you didn't pay taxes and you didn't do all the strategies I said. And now your daughter, are you going to then chance your daughter then, having her, getting screwed by the IRS? Or she's probably then going to have, she's going to not know these strategies and be nervous about this. And then all of a sudden she's, then going to claim the taxes, and you would have been way better off just doing the strategy I'm talking about anyways. And so you got to make sure that, upon your untimely death, like you go out here and I heard a story where a guy was doing ayahuasca out there or DMT, and he almost had a coconut fall on his head and almost died, like right over, and it fell like inches away. And this happened like 2 days ago. So if something untimely like that were to happen to you, who knows how to access your crypto? If there could be, it's not like you have to give somebody your private keys, but it could be, there's services out there where upon your death, it could send out an email to somebody, but the email, it shouldn't be your private key, but it could be like a treasure hunt on how to get to your private key, or maybe it's in one of Johnny Dollar's artwork pieces, which I didn't even know about that until I came here. So maybe the next slide I'll incorporate some of that, because that was pretty cool. There's better ways. I mean, you can have there's something called crypto steal, where with crypto steal, what you can do is you can, instead of just writing down your passphrase on a piece of paper, you put it into steal. Personally, what I did is I bought like a etch engraver pen on Amazon for probably 20 bucks, and I bought some steel plates myself for titanium, and I just engraved in private keys myself. You can chop them up, put them in different places. There's some other bonus stuff that I didn't put on the slides, but for my phone number, I give out, you guys see there, if there's any black hat hackers in there, they're probably thinking, oh, this guy's a moron, he's giving out a cell phone number to everybody and a Signal number to everybody. Well, I use Signal for most of my communications, but it's not my real number it's tied to. It's actually tied to a burner number, and then I use that burner app to then also do two-factor authentications, which you could hold a gun to my head and I don't even know the number to that. I also then, if there's people who I don't like or I don't want to talk to, I then give them out another bullshit number from my phone, so I can burn that immediately. And there's actually an app. I don't work for them. I'm not making any commission off this. It's called Burner App, and so I know some really tech geeks, and that's what they use, and I'm sort of a geek, so that's what I use too. So it's called Burner App, and then I pair that with Signal, and I even have another phone too. So then there's all sorts of stuff that you can do. We should have a class on this sort of stuff. So maybe I'll ask. Actually, Bob, and then we got some tech geeks over here, such as Bob, who could probably help you guys out with that for consultations. And just so you know why this is a workshop. So I initially said I wanted to do a workshop on crisis retiring, or how to retire into a crisis environment. And I wanted to do a crypto speech on this, but they ended up reversing it. And then they didn't even tell me that I was doing the workshop until, I didn't have this finalized till last Friday, but obviously I know this stuff like the back of my hand. So, another thing I'm going to talk about, this is in the bonus section over here, is why would anybody ever want to think about putting crypto inside their IRA? Oh, that's fancy. I didn't know how that happened. So, let's say somebody hypothetically, because a lot of, especially, the very first thing I hear is, and as I was trying to construct these structures, I was keeping my friend Ernest Hancock in mind, because Ernie, hardcore anarchist, he was speaking at the first one of these. He's spoken here 3 times. A lot of you might know him. But I'm like, if I can make him happy, then I can make anyone happy. And what would be the first thing that he would bitch at? Because he likes to bitch. And if he was here, he would agree with me. So, and actually, when the transaction fees were $50, he's like, you know what? And I paid $50 so that way I can bitch about paying $50 to the Bitcoin core guys. He's like, so I gladly did this. And, and he would be proud of me for being up here right now. And he's actually going to be touring the country for the next year in a bus spreading vaccine education awareness. So that's actually why he's not here right now, because he's getting that already. And so the first question somebody would say is, well, why would I just cash out my $100,000 of my IRA or my 401k and just use it to buy Bitcoin? Like, I'm not an idiot. They're going to, that would be the thing to do. And so, okay, I'll show you why you would want to do it my way instead. So if you had bought Bitcoin January 1st, 2017, and we're looking at one person that cashed out their 401k and IRA, looking at another person that decided to do what is called a Roth conversion, and we're going to talk about who ended up better off in this situation. The person that cashed out, and again, past performances, no indication of future returns, all the other stuff in case the SEC ends up getting this at a later date. So the person who cashed out a year later would have $896,415. Yeah, that's pretty good. The person that did the Roth conversion would have over $1 million. But the person that did the Roth conversion, so a Roth, all gains are tax-free. So this is a legal tax-free gain. Once you have your money in an account open for 5 years, you can actually take out what you put in without getting taxes. You can hold on to the private key. So the next thing I hear is like, oh, it's an IRA, so the government can confiscate it. Well, until Elon Musk gets his Neuralink thing and they can read your mind, unless you physically give the government your private key, you have the private key, so I've got that base checked as well. So this is a legal tax-free way where investment, and it doesn't have to just, inside a self-directed IRA, there's a lot of things you can do. So, but there's a lot of caveats where if you try doing it yourself, you can get yourself in trouble. So I actually had a lawyer who came up to me and was like, oh, Tim, I loved your presentation. And actually I went out and I did this myself because, lawyers think they're super smart on everything and that they know everything. So, they think they're like the police or something. And so I was like, oh, really? What are you doing with that? She goes, well, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go buy a house, and I'm going to put my house inside the IRA. I'm going to go live in it. And I'm going to go, really? I'm like, well, how deep into this are you? She's like, oh, well, I'm closing on it tomorrow. And I go, good, because now your entire fucking IRA is just a taxable event. So, you just cost yourself, you wanted to save a little money and not work with me or advise with me, and now you just cost yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars. Congratulations. And there's a lot of other stupid little rules in there, like, if you have a house inside there that you want to use for rental income and you want to go change your light bulb, you can't you can't change the light bulb, you got to hire somebody. But getting back to Bitcoin, so I mean, you can put businesses inside of there. And so anything you think is going to highly appreciate, that's where you want to look at something like either an economic opportunity zone, a charitable lead trust, or one of these Roth conversions. There's smart ways to do Roth conversions using other strategies I talked about where you can lower your taxable income. And especially now with Trump in there, with the tax rates being where they are, this is like the prime time to do this stuff. I mean, if you want to wait till the CIA asset Pete Buttigieg gets in there or Bernie Sanders, I mean, this is the time to do it, not when one of those clowns get in there. I think it's also important you diversify. Oh, yeah. So you could also just do an IRA rollover. The person that did the IRA rollover would have $1.37 million, but that would be a taxable gain, and when you take that out, it's going to count as income versus the Roth. When you take that out, it doesn't count as anything. It doesn't add anything to your income, so that's a pretty cool thing. A lot of people are already in the stock market. Maybe not a lot of people in this room. Eventually, I think the stock market will be on a blockchain. But one of the things that I think is important, and I talked about this in TDV, is if you're already in the stock market, you're already diversified a little bit, there's smart ways to do it. I came here, actually I made a video October 3rd, 2018, where it was a client video. I then later repurposed it as a podcast because it was kind of ridiculous, spot on. And what I said was, I don't believe that anything Jerome Powell is saying. The very next day is when he made his autopilot, where they said they're going to raise interest rates by 1/4 point every quarter, and they're going to sell $50 billion of bonds off their balance sheet. And I had other videos going back 2 years prior to that because they had telegraphed this out a while in advance. I'm like, there's no way they can do that. And so what's going to happen is I think the stock market's going to go down, and then the Fed's going to then reverse course. And then when they reverse course, I think the stock market's then going to go back up. And so what I did is I had a strategy where I essentially bought insurance on the major averages. And so that way I knew my client's max downside was about 4%. But if the Fed then printed a bunch of money, which the other day Jerome Powell said that that's the game plan, that they're going to print even more money next financial crisis, I thought that would mean the market would go up. And so now the clients that were with me in September, October, because that's when I started bringing clients back on because of all the BS that went on with the state of Arizona holding up my paperwork. Basically the worst that they can do in my strategy right now, because we have this protected all the way throughout the next selection or the election, basically the worst they can do is about 28% more than if they started with me in, assuming everything goes to hell in a handbasket. And so it's also a more advanced strategy. So, I mean, I'm just like a financial ninja and all this stuff. I mean, there's only so much I'm an Iron Man, so I guess I could stay up here and talk all day. But, I do want to go to the pool and drink at some point too. But, eventually, actually, I think I went the wrong way on that. Other ways that I think that blockchain is going to revolutionize things is, let's say when it comes to different interest payments. If you could put interest payments on a blockchain, there's a premium to be paid if you get payments every year versus twice a year versus quarterly versus monthly. And so as the frequency increases, there's usually premiums to be paid with that in terms of the different insurance companies or anyone that's issuing debt. Now with blockchain, what if you could do it by the day, or what if you could do it by the minute, or what if you could do it by the second, or what if you could do it by the millisecond? And so I think blockchain technology is going to then help out tremendously with that as well. One of the biggest risks that I see out there, and I think I'm almost done with this, is something called sequence of return risk. That is the notion, and this also has to do with market risk, but again, if you guys wanted to text, I accidentally gave them the wrong slide, so the number is 71441. So the number is 71441, and then if you text crypto, I will send you my presentation from last year. I'll send you this one and the TDV one from the past 2 years, because this is what I did my entire presentation on TDV last year. So a sequence of return risk, it's a notion that it's not your average. It's not your average return that matters. It's the order of your returns. So let's say you start investing year one, you go down 80%. It doesn't matter if you average 10%, if you get shellacked year one. And so, oops, actually I do have this slide in here. So let's say you've got two people here. They both start off with $1 million. They're both pulling $50,000 per year. They're in a 60-40 portfolio, or 50% stocks, 50% bonds. We assume they average 5.1% rate of return. So both of these people average the exact same thing, take out the exact same money. Everything is the same except the order of their returns are the mirror image of one another. So you see this is just flipped. And so the person that started off with having 3 bad years, after 10 years, wound up with $630,000. The person that ended with 3 bad years had over $1 million. Now, this also works in reverse, too, so if you can have a good sequence of return as well. So I don't want to be out here like fear-mongering people, but my strategy, and at least in the stock market, also protects against that as well. And now, let's say you're down 30%, and it doesn't really matter what year. Let's say you're down 30%. Well, to get back to even, you then have to, and you're withdrawing 4%, you then have to get up. A lot of people think, oh, well, I just need to make that 30% back. You actually have to make up 63% to get back to even, assuming the market was down 30. And so a lot of people in bonds, I mean, they're going to get absolutely wrecked. There's no way they're going to recover from that. And this is the biggest thing that I'm worried about, is protecting my clients from sequence of return risk. That's out there. And this is actually how things work in real life. So there's different examples over. I actually forgot to even put this in here because I was talking with some people at the pool instead of looking at my presentation, so I forgot this was in here. But how this one works, this is how things would work in real life. So what we have here is some investor starts off with $500,000. They're withdrawing 4.05% a year. They adjust that every year for inflation. And the portfolio is basically 60% stocks, 40% bonds. And what it looks like is the person, and again, they're withdrawing the exact same, they're invested the same. This is how it worked in real life. The person that retired in January 1969, they ran out of money at age 91. And the person that retired, what is that, like 15, 16 months later, they passed away with about $2.6 million. And it all had to do with that 16-month window of when they decided to retire. And so if you're not protecting yourself against sequence of return risk, and you're in the stock market, I think you're making an absolute grave error. Now, a lot of people just say, oh, I'll just keep my money in cash. Well, that's basically going broke safely, in my opinion. I did come up with that in 2008, but I didn't copyright it or anything. And crypto investors, we obviously have a massive potential for sequence of return risk. Anyone that got in late 2017, maybe January 2018, you bought into, it doesn't really matter which one you bought into, they all got shellacked. But if you don't have any other assets outside of your crypto, because what you don't want to do is then be forced to sell, like all these companies that raise money in Ethereum. Now all of a sudden, Ethereum, goes from, I don't know what it was, like 15, 1,200, something like that, and then all of a sudden it's, down. I think it got down to $70. If they didn't diversify out of that or have other cash to then use the cash, then they had to then sell Ethereum at $70, which then probably eventually led it to get to 70, and they should have had me as an advisor, so that way they could have done this, and they should have planned ahead. So the most important thing you want to do is you want to plan ahead and all this stuff. I've got a lot of propaganda that I put out, but you guys probably don't know me because my first Facebook page was created right before the election in 2016. I did 10% what the Russians did. I came up with an actual fake news list 2.5 months before Trump used it. I listed one person by name, Paul Krugman. He then won Trump's award for most fake news. I also had a video saying that Trump would win in September of 2016, and I said that they would then blame it on the Russians, and this is why they blame it on the Russians, a lot of crazy stuff. So if you guys want to have a lot of knowledge dropped on you, I'm on World Alternative Media with Josh Segerson and John Sneisen, and I joined up with them because I went from getting, the first 3 months I had 32,000 subscribers, and today I've got 30,000 4 years later. Because I've been completely shadow banned. If I go on Facebook, and I'm lucky if my mom will even see it. So my mom's cool with this stuff. The rest of my family doesn't really like any of this stuff and tells me to stop it. And my dad actually last week was like, if your clients found out you talked about the police on Facebook, they're all going to leave you. I'm like, no, Dad, I'm at Cryptopulco. They're not going to leave me. Trust me. And a lot of you might find that kind of funny. So another way is I'm using another social media called float.app. Kingsley Edwards is going to be here in a couple days, but he's helping his fiance move right now. But if you go to float.app/Liberty Advisor, and my cover, it's got all the different places you can find me, whether it's BitChute, DLive, Instagram, the podcast, LinkedIn. And John and I, so John Sneisen, my main man over here, we do a lot of videos together because we're both big economic geeks, and we just have a Discord. So for the people that texted in too, we'll show you that too. Because basically, screw these guys. Like I'm on these enemy platforms, but I'm mainly on the enemy platforms to tell people to get away from it. And every marketing person I knew told me you should not, as a financial advisor, have a porcupine with tie-dyed hair with an AR-15 and a blunt in his ear. Because that would be bad. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to scare away everybody who just let them know off the bat what they're going to get. And so I want to be able to find my tribe. You guys here in Cryptopulco, this is my tribe. Hey, Raj. And hit me up at the Liberty booth. Somebody did tell me it knocked over, so it might just be a tablecloth over there. But as soon as you guys walk out, it's over there. I'm very approachable. I'm not going to bite your head off or anything. I am taking on clients, and I'd love to help people out. And I hope you guys found this to be informational. You guys should go tell your friends that, hey, there's this guy talking like a machine gun that just knows all the stuff, and you guys should have been here. But I was competing with James Corbett, who was the #1 person who I wanted to see here. Second person I wanted to see was Etienne de la Boutier Squared, and both of them are speaking right now. So I super appreciate that you guys are here and not seeing James Corbett, who's probably the most prolific researcher in the world. So that definitely means a lot to me. I'll be here till Tuesday, so you guys hit me up. I hope you guys found that valuable, and thank you very much. Actually, does anyone have any questions?